If you want to support independent content like this show, the PlayStation Podcast Sacred Symbols, the Retro Podcast Knockback, and more, and get perks for doing so, please consider subscribing to Colin's Last Stand on Patreon at patreon.com/Colin's Last Stand. Your support is essential. Thank you. There's this scene in Star Wars A New Hope where a doofy Luke Skywalker runs into a Death Star prison cell dressed as a stormtrooper and tells a snarky Princess Leia that he's there to rescue her. But today, my friends, it's time to stage a new kind of rescue. The rescue of the Star Wars license from publisher Electronic Arts. Listen, I think the hyperbole surrounding everything Star Wars is out of control, both on the good end and the bad, so it's easy, and sometimes smart, to default to the grain of salt theory and handwave overpraise and outrage criticism alike. But I don't think it's an extraordinary stretch to say that EA has completely botched its handling of the valuable, seemingly limitless Star Wars IP, and that Disney should wrest the license back so that it might fit comfortably in more capable hands. Without knowing the full nature of the deal the two entities have with each other, details which were never completely disclosed, it's impossible to say if such a severance could even happen at all, until, say, a certain time. Still, it fills me with hope to dream. Now, I'm not an EA hater either. I think they make a lot of mistakes, and they don't make all that many games that I care about, especially over the last few years. But the chatter about them often borders on the absurd. The fact that they were repeatedly voted the worst company in America, for instance, was an overt act of stupid internet activism run amok, especially with mass polluters, financial criminals, and traitorous entities mulling about. Their handling of their E3 press conference continues to confound, though I suppose they know best who's buttering their bread. And it's fun to be critical of their sports annualization obsession, but those games are some of the best-selling titles in America year in and year out, so clearly they're catering to someone. Attacking EA is kind of like attacking Donald Trump. It's often earned, but sometimes it simply isn't, and you kind of look dumb when you do it repeatedly for any reason whatsoever. But there's also no doubt that Electronic Arts has recently suffered some serious setbacks, and simply isn't the same company with the same level of respect it was even 5 years ago, no less 10 or 20. This is true even without the Star Wars scenario we're discussing today. Now, no rational person would question EA's long-term financial health, if merely due to its staggering portfolio of valuable properties, but it is experiencing a rough road right now. Indeed, EA's stock lost a full quarter of its value in October of 2018 alone, and its monetary worth is only slightly recovering. And while the company is making a profit, it may be getting out-hustled around the edges. While business is in no way, shape, or form an altruistic exercise, investors have rightly noted that EA's finances first approach is transparent to both the market and its customers, which seems to be having a long-term drag on the very way we look at the publisher. And 2019 itself might prove to be rough, depending on how games like BioWare's Anthem perform, and how the long tail of commercial disappointments like Battlefield 5 pan out in the end. Thing is, though, EA has a tremendous trump card in its back pocket, a trump card that could ameliorate many of its problems and act as a tide that lifts all boats in its vicinity. Yet every time it tries to play it, it accidentally throws it on the ground or into someone's drink or conspicuously rips it in half. Since 2013, Electronic Arts has had the exclusive right to make Star Wars games on console, handheld, and PC. No other publisher, not Activision, nor Ubisoft, nor Bethesda, nor even the first parties can make a play there, unless their game was, say, something mobile or casual. Disney, which purchased the Star Wars universe from George Lucas and his company in 2012 for $4 billion, essentially handed the keys to the, well, galaxy to EA. This deal should have, could have, and many thought would have netted not only incredible financial results for all parties involved, but critical smash hits that took advantage of the endless potential of the Star Wars license. When the deal was signed, both parties were undoubtedly bullish, and frankly, there was no reason to expect otherwise. But EA has messed it all up, and they've messed it all up badly. Since the ink was still wet on the contracts in 2013 until today, Electronic Arts hasn't released a Star Wars game of critical consequence or anywhere close to it. Not one. With its network of worldwide teams working on exorbitant budgets, EA has managed an average of one console Star Wars game every 3 years, and both of them came from the same franchise, the multiplayer-centric Battlefront. One of the two games didn't even have a campaign. The other one had a campaign so atrociously assembled that they may have been better off not releasing a single-player experience at all. EA and Disney were no doubt pleased with the sales, and even the mediocre reception of the first one, as it was their first foray into something bigger, something grander. But the second game wasn't well received, bogged down with microtransactions and other ill-conceived monetization opportunities layering a patina over a rushed, incomplete product, a game released at a time when competition in the realm of multiplayer was, and still is, heating up. Otherwise, when it comes to the hardcore console, PC, or handheld spaces, EA has done literally nothing with Star Wars that many people watching a video like this one would care about. What they have done was make promises but not deliver on them. After opting to cancel the already in development Star Wars 1313, which by accounts I've heard was primed to be something potentially special, EA made multiple moves, but two have resonated most. In the fall of 2017, it canceled a single-player Star Wars game helmed by famous games writer and creative director Amy Hennig, the woman largely responsible for Sony's Uncharted franchise, and shuttered the entire studio behind it, Visceral Games. This came as quite the shock for multiple reasons, among them that single-player games are experiencing a sort of renaissance, and that EA had in its stable talent like Hennig that understood exactly how to make a third-person action-adventure game work. Then, just last week, EA killed the open-world Star Wars game under development at EA Vancouver, a studio and a project that reportedly absorbed some staff and some assets from the cancelled Visceral project. This second announcement naturally left people reeling, and is ultimately the reason for this video because it begs the question, what in God's name is EA doing? How can they botch this situation so badly? How can they not get Visceral, a well-respected team behind the Dead Space franchise, to operate properly, particularly with Hennig at the wheel? How can they promise an open-world Star Wars game and then just pull the plug? How can you not take the fullest possible advantage of Star Wars, period? Just what's going on over there anyway? In the eyes of players, investors, critics, and passersby alike, Electronic Arts has completely lost the plot. Yes, it may rake it in with FIFA and Madden, and it may do just fine with its mobile offerings, and it may even give a wink and a nod to indie initiatives every once in a while. But EA has Star Wars, my friends, Star Wars, and they have virtually nothing to show for it. So now it's time to consider if Disney should foist the IP onto another entity, and the obvious answer to that inquiry is yes, of course they should. Disney should steal Star Wars away from EA and give it to another publisher who actually understands what it's doing, and this move should be made with haste. The reality is you could practically trip over a publisher that could easily and reliably shepherd all things Star Wars video games with much more skill and with much better results than EA. Bethesda would be an interesting choice with its unique array of worldwide teams, ranging from Arcane to Machine Games to Tango and beyond, that could put an interesting stamp on Star Wars. Ubisoft likewise has a network of teams that are more than capable of delivering. Even gaming's arch nemesis Activision would at least get on base, if not hit a home run or two, if given the opportunity. And I'm sure the first parties would fight endlessly and throw limitless money at Disney for the opportunity to court Star Wars in some permanent way, though that would be profoundly bad business for anyone not named Sony, Microsoft, or Nintendo. But here's the rub, none of that is necessary. Instead, Disney merely needs to look at what another of its imprints, Marvel, has done with its gaming offerings and take note. Marvel's gaming history has had some serious ups and downs, some gems, some underrated offerings, and a lot of mediocrity, alongside the astonishingly bad. To extract the potential out of its amazingly popular IP, it has opted to at least partially distribute its games on a one-off basis to teams and publishers that can best handle the individual product in question. There's no doubt that Sony and its second-party partnership with Insomniac netted a critical and commercial smash hit in PS4's Spider-Man. But it's also true that Marvel didn't just give Sony everything either after that success. Instead, while you can certainly count on a Sony-exclusive Spider-Man sequel, you can also expect to play Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 exclusively on Switch, developed by Team Ninja and published by Nintendo. This, my friends, is called letting the market work. When dev teams and publishers have to be at their absolute best and don't simply get the benefit of the doubt, we all win. See, it's not that Electronic Arts is incompetent. Clearly, that's not the case. They have tens of millions of annual customers all over the world, and they're an especially well-respected name when it comes to sports games, with which they have virtually no major competition. It's just that they're incompetent here, now, with this, and it needs to be called out. It deserves to be called out, because it's a true shame that during the height of the Star Wars resurgence, before people really started to get bitter and divisive and love or hate everything indiscriminately, just to own the cons or libs, we didn't have real Star Wars games to celebrate with. We didn't have anything close to an X-Wing vs. TIE Fighter, or a Knights of the Old Republic, or even a Super Star Wars or Shadows of the Empire. We had two frankly mediocre multiplayer shooters that sold because they were Star Wars games, not because they were good. And by the time the second one rolled around, people were already wise to the situation. EA simply doesn't have a passion for Star Wars, it hasn't delivered, and they should give up the ghost and move on. Their complacency and sheer inability has wasted everyone's time and everyone's hope. Then again, it doesn't necessarily seem likely that Disney is ready to pull the plug or explore a Marvel-like approach, at least not yet. Even in the light of the aforementioned most recent game cancellation, EA is still apparently releasing a Star Wars game called Jedi Fallen Order this fall, a title under development at Respawn, the guys behind Titanfall, a Star Wars game so important to EA that they announced it from the crowd at E3 during an awkward impromptu interview and then barely ever spoke about it again. We straight up have absolutely no reason to believe in this game because, and no offense to Respawn, EA doesn't get it. I'd love for Jedi Fallen Order to be great, and I really hope that it is, but even if this other smaller game they're now teasing is good, it's too little, too late. So much time has been wasted, so much potential has been squandered, and so much hope has been thrown away. EA's handling of Star Wars should be an embarrassment for the company, something that Disney itself should fix if EA can or won't. With Marvel's games initiative, Disney has a blueprint. It has a blueprint in its own drawer. It just needs to be smart enough to get out of its own way and execute on a plan that already works.